Guys, very exciting day. I just took delivery of the rear bumper for the GX460 from North Fab. So that's going to delete this ugly thing that I've got from the factory here where it bolts into the frame. So this piece will be gone, and this piece, the bumper will fit right up against the rear cross member. Time to start cutting. I'm going to remove the bumper first, bolt this up, and then figure out how much more I need to trim. So to remove the factory bumper, mine's a little easier because I've already trimmed it once, so all this stuff down here has already been removed. I think I have that in another video. But you have connectors on both sides. So you got these two white connectors here. And then on mine, I just have a screw down here that I added, a screw up here, and then two plastic pop rivets here and here. Sit on both sides, and you can just kind of grab it. You can start popping it out all the way around. All right, so trying to put the bumper on, run into an issue immediately. The dimension between this rail and this rail is off by about 1/4 of an inch because you can't fit it around the frame. So these welded caps pieces on here, maybe they're not on the, I don't know, the 2010 GX460, but I'm pretty sure they are. So this bumper's probably just out of tolerance. But yeah, that doesn't fit. So probably going to have to do a ton of grinding and hammering to make this, make the frame a little narrower to fit the bumper over it. All right, so I've now got a floor jack under both sides of the bumper. And you can clearly see it is not going to fit over these caps on the frame rail. This one is just starting to slide over it, but this one is not happening. So at a minimum, gonna have to do some grinding, grind these welds flat for sure, and grind/hammer the shit out of these to get it to fit over the frame. I also really don't like how big these slots are. I know they have to give you some adjustability, but they didn't include any washers with those bolts. So that's pretty shitty. So I'm gonna be using the OEM bolts because they're higher grade with some big washers. Eventually I'll get some thicker washers because this is essentially your trailer hitch, right? So you want it mounted to the frame really solid. This was the factory piece that Lexus had there. As you can see, it's thicker steel. All right, so I had to hammer it in a little bit. You can kind of see how it's concave now, and then grind the corners and grind this weld back here. And it's getting closer to fitting. Trying not to take off any more material than I need to. Alrighty, so the fun continues. So I got the frame massaged down enough to where that just barely fits around it. And I've got these 6 bolts in. These aren't tight, but the other 4 are. You can see it's flush there, and it's flush there for the most part. Could go up a little bit maybe. But the problem is, these last 4 bolts that go up where the factory hitch would go do not line up, as you can see. So either gotta open up these holes a little bit or find a way to get the bumper to sit farther back. I really wish this was thicker right here, this piece. Also, there's a really good gap between these holes. So I don't see these bolts doing a lot of good if there's that much of a gap between them and the frame. Yep, there's also a big gap right here, but they expected that and they gave you these pieces that'll slide in there and take up that gap. So that's not a big deal. They thought about that, just not anything else apparently. This will go up in here somehow, like that. Do have to grind a weld to get it to slide in there the right spot. Also had to cut the corners off of these spacers to make them fit around a big weld. I didn't want to cut the weld off because it'd be a bunch of grinding and I would lose some strength. You see that big weld right there, right in the center of the phone? So I cut this to fit around it instead of just lopping off that big weld. Threaded inserts that I assume go with these 2 holes, because of course there's no instructions with these things. So you gotta get these in the frame rail somehow and then drill 2 holes. Okay, so more abuse to my frame. These are the 2 holes you have to drill for these 2 mounts right here. Unfortunately, they do not line up with the factory hole, which is all the way out here, so you end up with this stupid looking oblong bottom one on both sides. Very ugly. Another win for you guys with this bumper design. Now I'm gonna put it up there, try to fish in that those nuts behind here so I can use that to suck the bumper in a little bit to get these holes to line up. That's currently my plan. All right, so here's what I do to get it to line up. I'd use a ratchet strap to pull it forward and kind of bend the bumper a little bit this way. And now that tube lines up a little better with the fender guard. It's still not quite perfect, but it did let me get these 2 bolts in without. So you got your 2 down here. I need to order some thicker washers. That's all I had. They didn't supply any. And I've got these up here. Again, I need thicker washers. See how those are bending? That's 100% why you need big washers. Every hitch comes with them. And then these and these. I used all the OEM Toyota bolts because, quite frankly, they look better than these. Say 8.8, but they look like, you know, Chinesium bolts. And I got those down there. And then these 2 right here. What I don't have is any of the bolts in here. So I got this huge gap to contend with. I'm not sure how I want to deal with that yet. I really want, you know, a metal to metal connection there. But it's pretty solid the way it is now. But for doing recoveries and stuff where you're pulling on these tabs, you don't want to bend the bumper down because this plate extends down here. It's a little braced, but it's pretty thin metal. So having those 2 bolts in here make this recovery point a whole lot stronger. That foam sits on top of it, but everything else beneath that's got to be cut off, which means all of this gets cut off and I'm losing my beloved parking sensors. Just kidding, I never really use them. So really not that big of a deal, I guess. Fun, fun, fun. All right, it's bolted in place. These bolts were just as much of a pain in the ass as everything else. Had to find some longer bolts, found some nice Honda bolts off a dirt bike, mint. And you had to make these big spacers, 2 of those down in there, so that way it's metal to metal. Had to fish the brackets, the nuts, the plate with the 2 nuts all the way behind it. So the way I did that was I taped a piece of trailer brake for trailer light wiring to a coat hanger, put it through the top hole, and ran it all the way back into right here. Up in here, there's a hole big enough to put that little piece in. So if I can show it to you. I don't know if you can see that or not, but let's get that fished in flush here. And then I pulled my string tight through the top hole, went in with a bolt. But before I put the bolt into the bottom hole, I wrapped some electrical tape on it, 5 threads from the front. Then I would put a screwdriver in the top so I could get it kind of tight, get the electrical tape balled up in the threads, and then I could take that bolt head on the bottom and turn it to line up the top bolt. Get the top bolt in, run in a few threads, take this one out, take the electrical tape off, lock tight, torque them both down. That's how I did both sides. Talk about a pain in the ass. So everything's on there, it's pretty tight. And now for the part I really despise, cutting the bumper again. So I took a few measurements from the light down to here, and I transferred those over with little marks and then ran the tape around the top. This measurement right here is a little trickier. There's not much to measure off of that's really good. I know where the bumper is going to sit based off of this, because I know it sits about right here, but back here I'm kind of guessing. So what I did was I tried to leave a little extra from here to here, and I may have to trim that a few times, but I'm pretty sure I got the sides right. So the first cut came out okay. There's a pretty big gap here that I don't love on both sides. It's significantly bigger on this side, kind of for whatever reason. I kept this height the same, so whatever. I am putting some trim molding on here, some black trim molding that'll make that look a little better, but I wish I had let this come down a little farther so it wouldn't have such a big gap here. But it is what it is at this point. Just kind of goofy how, you know, the shape of the bumper hangs out there. Protects the corner well, but I hate the look of that gap. But this right here is the correct height, especially once I put the trim molding on there. That'll be good. And this side over here is the correct height, especially once I put the trim molding on there and get all this bolted up. It'll look pretty close, pretty symmetric. And as you can see, it's kind of melted because I cut it with the grinder again. Makes a pretty nice straight cut. Now the main issue is that it kind of crosses over the bumper right here. So you can see it's kind of sitting on the lip, which is not ideal. So I need to trim some more off of this. I left this kind of like a rough cut because I knew I'd be trimming there again. The body trimming is complete. I'm gonna pull the bumper off one more time to put the trim molding on it, I'm gonna trim it a little more in this spot right here on this side. The rest of it's pretty good. Maybe a little more right here. And a little bit right here. I'm gonna get trimmed. And the rest is pretty good. As far as the wiring, I deleted all the wiring for the parking sensors. And I just took the wiring for the lights and zip tied it to this bar like so. Tuck it up there so it's a little safer and out of the way. And that is about it, really. Put this nice edge guard I got off of Amazon on there. It sits along the whole way, and it made this feel a lot more steady, because you see it does kind of sit on there a little bit. Made the step feel nice, and it looks good. It kind of filled the gap here, but you do have pretty big gaps on both sides. It is what it is. So that's on there, and then I bought these nice washers on McMaster. Hardened, nice thick structural washers, directional washers, as you know. I had to grind 2 of them to fit by the weld there. Obviously I painted everything, but these nice big washers should help make this stronger, because now that those 6 bolts are really nailed to the frame. Like I said, I don't exactly love this hitch, and I have to tow with it. I would feel a lot better if there was another bar like this going to the bottom of the hitch, which is how some of the other designs like this would work. So I wanted to give it the best chance of survival, so I got some really good washers, because my bumper kit, if you could call it a kit, didn't come with any washers. So another thing I just discovered to add to the list of reasons this bumper is very annoying, I hope the manufacturer takes note, this does not fit in there. I suspect that is because the powder coating is really tight. It fits that way, as you can see, but not this way. Obviously I can hammer it in there and I'll make it work. Just another thing that's pretty freaking annoying. Alright, so I grinded down the outside of my hitch to fit in the tube, and I also greased it, and I drilled a second hole. So that'll let me slide it a little deeper to put less twisting moment on the bumper and help it survive. As you can see, I made it slide as far back in there as I could by drilling that second hole, which gives it, less rocking, makes it stronger, and also the biggest thing is the longer your hitch is, the more twisting force your tongue weight and the trailer bouncing against your hitch puts on those welds.